Hello and welcome. As the countdown to Budget 2026 has begun, we try and decode what really will this budget have for you. Will it be populism over prudence? And remember, this budget is coming amid tariff threats, amid geopolitical and trade uncertainty. So, really, what could this budget then entail for India as well as for Indian consumers and Indian households? Now, to decode all of this, I'm joined by Mitali Nikore, senior economist. Mitali, thank you for your time as always. I'm also joined by Dr. Ujjwal Krishna, academic fellow, Australia India Institute, the University of Melbourne. Thank you both for your time. Mitali, for those saying that, look, this budget is then coming amid geopolitical and trade uncertainty, will it then cater to populism or prudence? Your first thoughts.
So I think, Sakshi, this time we're really looking at a budget of prudence. I think this time we are really looking at a situation where we have to balance a number of things. We have to balance, firstly, the fiscal deficit. That is always a very important concern. And I think this government has been extremely good at prioritizing our path towards, fiscal consolidation since the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years. COVID was a big challenge, and yet, we continued on our path of fiscal consolidation, and this year will be no different. And I do think that, that will be the first consideration. The second consideration will be to look at who are the groups, especially within industry, who require the maximum amount of support given the geopolitical landscape. We know that medium and small traders are the ones who require the maximum amount of support. There are certain clusters, there are certain sectors in the MSME space which require support, so that will be prioritized. And the third area of prudence will be to invest in our future. And the future investment really comes from three sectors, which will take precedence in my view. The first one is defense, because we are seeing across the world, especially at Davos also, it was very clear that people are, prioritizing defense. The second is energy diversification, so that we can reduce our dependence on oil imports and look at different sources of energy, particularly renewable energy. And the third is infrastructure, so that we can invest in, reducing our logistics cost, and we can improve our, overall productivity. So I do think budget of prudence is what I'm looking forward to.
The budget of prudence is what you're looking forward to. Well, the spotlight will really be on what happens then. But Ujjwal, coming to you really, this budget is amid geopolitical uncertainty, amid trade uncertainty that the world has seen. Your thoughts really on what this budget could then deliver?
Yes, actually, and absolutely, that's right. We are seeing this budget come in the middle of a very contentious geopolitical environment, where we have seen that the world's largest power, the United States, has taken a very combative stance in terms of global trade issues. And to a large extent, India has held firm to the extent it can in response to those pressures, a lot of which politically India has to sort of take a view of what it can achieve in terms of pushing back, but also what it can acquiesce to and what it can agree to. So to that extent, at a foreign policy level and a trade policy level, India has done reasonably all right in terms of reacting and responding to this exogenous shock in some senses. But apart from that, I think within those parameters, this is also an opportunity, given this is Prime Minister Modi's third term, and it's a budget which is coming at somewhat in the middle of this third term. And to that extent, there aren't as many serious populist pressures that the government faces, in the sense that the political cycle is not at that point. We are not near elections. And because of that, this is an opportunity for the government to signal its intent for serious long-term structural reforms in government. And to that extent also, recognizing the fact that there are pressures in terms of defense spending, in terms of what it needs to think about in terms of containing the fiscal deficit to around 4.5%, or even perhaps few basis points less than that percentage range. But apart from that, it also sort of is an opportunity for the government to signal its intent on the building blocks of the Indian economy, and that is what is often in budget season seen as the softer sectors to invest in: education, health, research and development. And this is a sort of a structural trend in terms of how these sectors are addressed in India, but in Indian budget discussions. But these are the building blocks basis which a lot of other things are catapulted, and the base on which a lot of other sectors of the Indian economy are dependent indirectly and directly.
Right. So a lot of structural changes is really what you're anticipating this budget. But Mitali, for those watching and wondering that, look, what does this budget then have in it for me? What do you think budget 2026 will then cater to as far as Indian consumers and Indian households are concerned?
So I think, Sakshi, the first thing that Indian households are worried about in this year is going to be our petrol costs, because they can understand everybody is following what is happening internationally, and everybody knows that India is under a lot of pressure, from various quarters to diversify its oil procurement, right? We have to buy from Venezuela, we have to buy from Russia, we have to buy from the UAE. We have to keep everybody happy because we are amongst the biggest oil consumers in the world. So people are saying, okay, but what does this mean for my car bill, for my energy cost, for my electricity bill, for my industry? Because even for the industries, electricity costs are a huge component. So I think this is one area in which the government can even make the budget a little more popular, as well as invest in, as Ujjwal bhai rightly said, the building blocks. Because when you think about improving power sector infrastructure, when you start investing in renewable energy, it actually brings down the cost for your everyday consumer as well, the cost of living. And also the logistics cost reduces, because the cost of nearly every commodity is influenced by the oil purchases we are doing. Even our foreign exchange improves when we focus more on renewable energy. So there are a lot of reasons to focus on this energy question in this budget.
Right. So Mitali's given her big hint there for this budget. Let's see if budget 2026 delivers on that or not. But Ujjwal, then coming to you, in terms of the big picture, the challenges and opportunities that are there for the finance minister this budget, your first thoughts.
Yes, I think in terms of what as I mentioned, what the finance minister can consider at this point in the political cycle is some of those long-term structural changes. So, and where do they sort of emerge from? So, the first question you asked me, which was to do with the contentious geopolitical environment, trade uncertainty. Who are the frontline actors who deal with these problems? It is India's foreign policy establishment, India's trade negotiators, and the capacity of government officials, of specialists engaged with government, who are advising into these processes, policy processes. It's them who have to sort of be at the front line of all of these things. But as we know, India's foreign policy establishment, India's the size of the Indian Foreign Service, the Group A part of the Indian Foreign Service is abysmally poor compared to India's stature and importance in the world. Lowy Institute, which is based here in Australia, where I live, they do a global diplomacy index, and in that India ranks, I think, around 11th. And it's an index of all the major powers and the size and quality of their diplomatic establishments. To that extent, if you just compare India to comparable countries of its size, China, the US, India's just a very raw indicator. The number of missions India has abroad is a very low count compared to them. I mean, it's around 16 to around 2023 by around 20, so it's around 194 at the moment, which is a sizable growth. But you compare it to the size of the foreign policy establishment that China, even Turkey, a middle power to that extent, has. It's quite low. So why I'm sort of coming back to this issue is it's not simply the size of the civil service and the size of the diplomatic establishment that India has. India needs to have structural reforms in its administrative infrastructure, so to speak, so as to make it possible for not only people selected through the competitive examination process, but also, and I know that in India, the lateral entry, debate in in terms of entry into the administrative service and other government positions has sort of taken a bit of a setback in terms of in the last few years. But I think there is a need to sort of rejig this process, think about not just intake, and to increase the numbers of the foreign policy establishment, of the administrative setup, but also to think about quality. And to that extent, the government has made some investments in this direction. There's the capacity building commission, Mission Karma Yogi, and all of these which are addressing capacity building constraints. But the size of expenditure and outlay to these, and the ambitiousness of these capacity building processes, there is much more that can be done. So I think I'll just sort of bring it back to, in terms of budget outlays, since there's an opportunity right now to think about and also invest in some of these longer term processes. I would be hopeful that the finance minister looks at some of these broader structural issues, and not specifically just at schemes, welfare schemes, or any other sort of economic measures. Obviously, they will be a big part of it, but this also needs to be a sizable component of what the government signals its intent towards.
Right. Mitali, do you agree? And now there are challenges, right? We have, of course, at Davos heard Geeta Gopinath say that, look, pollution costs India more than tariffs. So implementation on the ground remains a key concern. So your thoughts really on the challenges that this budget then has to cater to and overcome. So India continues to remain one of the fastest growing economies, and of course is soon then going to be the third largest in the world. So your thoughts really on how all of these challenges that Ujjwal was also explaining can be addressed, and then the big opportunities that really India has ahead of India.
Thanks, Sakshi. So I think I'll just break down the answer into 2-3 parts. Let's first start with, what does the finance minister have to balance this time? Because, there are so many different requirements always, right? The first thing she has to balance is the requirements of the marginalized sections of the population. The poor, the women, the unemployed youth, the farmers, our entire, which we have been following for the last few years, Nari, Yuva, Annadata, that entire set of people, and Garib. So the Gyan, GYN, groups, that is the first, and they are the ones with the first right to the budget, right? We know that the public sector expenditure is for their welfare. So we have to first look at welfare. We are a welfare state. The second area that we have to look at is growth. Because if we don't have growth, we cannot achieve fiscal consolidation and we cannot meet the needs of the marginalized. So we have to have growth. Now, for us to have growth, what are some of the areas we also have to have? But this year, we have to have one more thing apart from the welfare and the growth, which is what we have most years. This year, we have to focus also on economic security. Now, what is economic security? This is a new consideration that has been added in 2026, which did not exist before this. The economic security aspect comes that when President Trump comes and says, tomorrow I'm increasing your tariffs from 50% to 500%, what are we supposed to do? We need to guard our economy from the global uncertainty that is imposed on us without our being able to, do anything about it. So we have to safeguard ourselves. So how do we safeguard ourselves? We have to start allocating some budget to support different parts of our economy, especially our growth engines, towards diversification. So one example of this is to have a package for MSMEs to support them with trade diversification, to support them with market diversification, to support them with energy diversification so that they can, also invest in renewable energy at the ground level. The other part in this economic security pillar is also about pollution, right? Because environmental factors and climate change is a risk to our economy. So we need to invest in creating urban areas. We need to invest in creating industrial zones, which are then inured, safe from this kind of climate impact. We need to also invest. So food security had stopped, it had disappeared from the conversation, right? For many decades, we achieved food security. But it's back in the discussion because of climate change. And we understand that today in India, food security doesn't mean having enough food grains. It means improving the nutritional status of our population, having enough protein, having enough legumes and pulses, having enough fruits and vegetables, not just having rice and wheat. So we need to start investing in our agricultural systems and irrigation infrastructure accordingly. So all of our budget priorities this year, in my view, center hugely on economic security and how to keep our country growing and the marginalized population secure, and providing them that safety net, while also keeping our growth safe. And of course, this is a very difficult task. Nobody thinks that this is going to be easy, but it is very critical for us this year to really focus on economic security. And of course, defense and like the actual expenditure for direct defense has to also increase again from this point of view of economic security, because we saw what happened in Pahalgam. We are seeing the conversations that are happening across our land borders, but then there are also considerations around the maritime areas and our ports and keeping our supply chains safe in the seas. So, while I might be sounding a bit alarmist, and we don't have to be alarmist, but we have to now start preparing in a consistent manner, because we are now not living in a world, and in the words of Mark Carney, there has been a rupture in the world order, not a disruption. So we need to now start investing in the economic security of our country.
Absolutely crucial to invest in the economic security for India. And of course, the focus now more than ever before on self-reliance and Atmanirbharta, as you were both saying. Lots of suggestions there, big opportunities. This budget 2026 really has big opportunities, a whole host of challenges that must be addressed to the best of course, the finance minister's ability. So really the spotlight on budget 2026 will remain. Thank you both for sharing your thoughts and all your suggestions, really. Thank you for your time.